chosen one. There was a moment in my life when everything felt ordinary, predictable, almost invisible, and then suddenly, without warning, something shifted so deeply that I could never return to who I used to be. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies show transformation. It was quiet, unsettling, and strangely powerful. One day I woke up and the world felt different, not because anything outside had changed, but because something inside me had. It was like my awareness had been turned up, like someone had adjusted the brightness of reality itself. Colors felt sharper, silence felt heavier, and even the smallest moments carried a strange meaning I had never noticed before. At first I thought it was just a phase, maybe stress, maybe imagination, but deep down I knew something irreversible had happened. The first sign my life changed overnight was the sudden feeling of disconnection from everything that once felt normal. Conversations that used to entertain me now felt empty. Places I once loved started to feel unfamiliar, almost distant, like I was walking through memories instead of living in the present. It wasn't sadness exactly, but it wasn't comfort either. It was like my soul had stepped back and was observing everything from a higher place. I found myself questioning things I had never questioned before. Why people chase what they chase, why certain patterns repeat in life, why I always felt like I was meant for something I couldn't explain. It felt like waking up in a life that was mine, but no longer fully aligned with who I was becoming. Then came the overwhelming sense of awareness. Suddenly I could feel energy in ways I never had before. I noticed the moods of people before they even spoke. I could sense tension in rooms, heaviness in silence, intention behind words. It was almost unsettling how clear everything became. I could no longer ignore red flags or pretend not to notice what felt wrong. Truth became impossible to avoid, and with that clarity came isolation. Because when you start seeing everything clearly, you also start realizing how much of life people live unconsciously. It wasn't that I felt better than anyone. It was that I felt different, like I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Another sign was the sudden collapse of things I thought were stable. Relationships shifted. Some people drifted away without explanation. Others became distant, uncomfortable, even irritated by me for reasons I couldn't understand. It was like my presence itself had changed frequency, and not everyone could stay in tune with it. At first, I tried to hold on. I tried to fix what was breaking, but the harder I tried, the more everything seemed to fall apart. Eventually I realized it wasn't destruction. It was clearing. What no longer matched who I was becoming simply could not remain. And even though it hurt, deep down I felt something strange, relief, like space was being made for something new, something more aligned, something I couldn't see yet but could feel approaching. My thoughts changed too. I couldn't think small anymore. My mind kept drifting toward purpose, meaning, destiny, words that once felt dramatic but now felt unavoidable. I started reflecting on my past differently, seeing patterns I had never noticed. Every struggle, every rejection, every moment I thought I was lost suddenly looked like preparation. It was like pieces of a puzzle rearranged themselves overnight into a picture that had always been forming, but I had never stepped back far enough to see it, and once I saw it I couldn't unsee it. Sleep changed. Either I slept deeply and woke up feeling like I had traveled somewhere far beyond dreams, or I couldn't sleep at all because my mind felt alive with thoughts, realizations, and strange bursts of clarity. Nighttime became a space of reflection, almost like messages surfaced when the world went quiet. I would wake up with sudden understanding, sudden ideas, sudden emotional releases that made no logical sense but felt necessary. It was like something inside me was reorganizing itself from the inside out. My intuition became louder than logic. Decisions that once required careful thinking now came with instant knowing. Not guessing, knowing. A strong inner pull toward certain paths and a strong resistance toward others. And whenever I ignored that inner voice, something felt off, heavy, misaligned. But when I listened, even if it didn't make sense at the time, things unfolded in ways I couldn't explain. It felt like guidance, quiet but persistent, invisible but undeniable. Another powerful sign was emotional intensity. Feelings became deeper, more raw, more real. I couldn't numb myself the way I used to. Happiness felt pure and expansive, but sadness felt like waves crashing through my chest. Old memories resurfaced without warning. Old wounds demanded attention. It was uncomfortable, overwhelming even, but also cleansing. like emotions were no longer something to suppress, but something to release, understand, and transform. And then there was the strange sense of being watched, not in fear, but in awareness. Like my life suddenly mattered in a way I couldn't explain. Like every choice carried weight. Like every moment held significance. I felt accountable not just to the world, but to something higher, something unseen but present. It wasn't pressure, it was purpose. A quiet understanding that my life was no longer random. That something meaningful was unfolding, even if I couldn't fully understand it yet. My priorities shifted overnight too. Things that once seemed urgent became meaningless, and things I had ignored for years suddenly felt essential. Growth mattered more than comfort. Truth mattered more than approval. Peace mattered more than fitting in. I stopped chasing validation because something inside me no longer needed it. It was like my identity detached from external definitions and started rebuilding itself from within. There was also an unexplainable inner strength that appeared without warning. Not loud confidence, but steady resilience. Challenges didn't feel like punishment anymore, they felt like training. Pain didn't feel pointless, it felt purposeful. Even in moments of confusion, there was a quiet belief that everything happening was shaping me into who I was meant to become. Time itself started to feel different. Days felt faster yet deeper, moments stretched in awareness. I became more present without trying. Even simple experiences, sunlight through a window, the sound of wind, the feeling of silence, carried depth I had never noticed before. Life stopped feeling like something I was rushing through, and started feeling like something I was meant to experience fully. But perhaps the biggest sign my life changed overnight was this unshakable inner knowing that I could never go back to who I was before. Even if I tried, even if I pretended, even if I wished for the simplicity of my old life, something fundamental had shifted. Awareness had awakened, purpose had stirred, and once that happens, there is no returning to sleep. It wasn't an event, it wasn't an achievement, it wasn't something I chose. It was something that happened to me, or maybe something that finally revealed itself within me. A quiet awakening that turned everything familiar into something new. A transformation that didn't ask for permission. A shift that happened overnight but changed everything forever. And the strangest part of all, even in the confusion, even in the isolation, even in the intensity of it all, something inside me felt certain. Certain that this change was not random. Certain that this awakening was not accidental. Certain that I was being shaped, guided, prepared for something greater than I could see. And once you feel that, once you truly feel that, you realize your life didn't just change overnight. You did. And once that shift happens, the real transformation doesn't stop, it begins. Because after the moment your life changes overnight, you start noticing something even more intense. The world begins responding to you differently. It's subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, but then it becomes undeniable. Situations start aligning in strange ways. Coincidences happen too often to be random. You think about something and it appears. You feel pulled in a direction and opportunities open there. It's as if reality itself is rearranging around your awareness, responding to the frequency you now carry. At first, this can feel confusing. You wonder if you're imagining patterns that don't exist, but the repetition is too precise, too meaningful, too perfectly timed to ignore. You start realizing that what once felt like chance may have always been guidance. You just weren't awake enough to recognize it before. Now every delay feels intentional. Every obstacle feels strategic. Every unexpected turn feels like redirection rather than misfortune. Life stops feeling random and starts feeling orchestrated. With this realization comes a strange mixture of trust and fear. Trust because you begin sensing that something greater is unfolding. Fear because control, the illusion of it, begins slipping from your hands. The plans you carefully constructed no longer unfold the way you expected. The future you once tried to force begins dissolving, making space for something unfamiliar. And that unfamiliar space can feel terrifying because it demands surrender. You begin letting go of things you once clung to tightly, not because you want to, but because holding on feels impossible. Certain ambitions lose their emotional charge. Certain attachments weaken without explanation. Even habits that defined your identity start fading, like they no longer have the power to hold you in place. It's not forced discipline, it's natural detachment, like your soul is shedding layers it no longer needs to carry. and this shedding can feel lonely. Because while your inner world expands, your outer world may temporarily shrink. You speak less, you observe more, you withdraw from noise, from chaos, from anything that feels energetically heavy. Solitude stops feeling empty and starts feeling necessary, like a space where your mind can breathe and your spirit can recalibrate. But people may not understand this change. They may interpret your silence as distance, your introspection as coldness, your growth as separation. Some may even try to pull you back into who you used to be, not out of harm, but out of familiarity. People feel safest when you remain predictable, but you are no longer predictable. And this is where the emotional testing deepens. Because transformation is not just awakening, it is refinement. Old fears resurface, but now they appear in stronger forms, as if life is presenting them one last time, asking, "Are you still controlled by this?" Situations repeat, but with higher stakes, deeper emotional triggers, stronger pressure. It feels almost unfair, like the universe is pushing you harder the moment you start growing stronger. But what you slowly realize is this: you are not being punished, you are being strengthened. Every challenge now reveals something hidden within you. Patience you didn't know you had. Courage that appears only when needed. Boundaries you finally learn to enforce. Self-respect that refuses to shrink. Each test strips away another illusion, another weakness, another outdated version of yourself. And although the process feels intense, it also feels purposeful, like you are being shaped with precision. Another powerful sign in this stage is the way truth becomes unavoidable. You can no longer lie to yourself to stay comfortable. You can no longer ignore what your intuition reveals. You see people clearly, not just their words but their intentions. Not just their actions but their energy. Masks become visible. Hidden dynamics become obvious. Emotional manipulation becomes transparent. And this clarity changes how you relate to everyone around you. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop chasing approval. You stop tolerating what drains you. Not from anger, but from awareness. And awareness changes everything. Even your relationship with fear begins to transform. Fear doesn't disappear, but it loses authority. You feel it, but you don't obey it automatically. You notice it, but you don't surrender to it. It becomes information rather than control. A signal, not a command. And that shift alone changes the direction of your life more than anything else ever could. Your inner voice grows stronger too, clearer, steadier, more persistent. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue. It simply knows. Sometimes it guides you toward things that make no logical sense, and yet when you follow, doors open in ways you couldn't have planned. Other times it warns you quietly, urging caution when everything appears normal on the surface. And each time you listen, trust deepens. Each time you ignore it, discomfort reminds you why alignment matters. Gradually you begin understanding that being chosen, whatever that truly means, is not about being special in the way the world defines special. It is not about status, recognition, or superiority. It is about responsibility. Awareness brings responsibility. Clarity brings responsibility. Growth brings responsibility. Once you see truth, you cannot pretend you don't. Once you recognize purpose, you cannot live aimlessly without feeling inner conflict. And that responsibility reshapes your daily life. You become more intentional with your time, more careful with your energy, more honest with your choices. You start asking deeper questions before every decision. Does this align with who I am becoming? Does this strengthen or weaken my path? Does this bring peace or distraction? This level of awareness can feel heavy sometimes because unconscious living is easier. But conscious living is more meaningful. And once meaning becomes your priority, ease is no longer the ultimate goal. Alignment is. Another sign of this transformation is the growing sense that you are being prepared, not just changed. Preparation feels different from random growth. It feels directed, specific. Certain skills sharpen unexpectedly. Certain interests intensify. Certain lessons repeat until mastered. It's like life is training you, equipping you, shaping your mindset and resilience for something ahead. Something you may not fully understand yet, but can sense approaching. You start noticing that even your past struggles now feel like part of that preparation. The pain that once seemed pointless now looks like conditioning. The isolation that once felt cruel now looks like strengthening. The confusion that once overwhelmed you now looks like expansion beyond your previous limits. Nothing feels wasted anymore. Everything feels integrated into a larger design, and with that realization comes a deep internal shift. Gratitude begins replacing resentment. Not forced gratitude, not pretending everything was easy, but genuine recognition that your hardships built capacities comfort never could. Strength, perception, emotional depth, spiritual awareness, discernment, resilience. These qualities rarely form in ease, they form in pressure. And you begin realizing you were never breaking. You were becoming. Another profound change is how you experience silence. Silence no longer feels empty or uncomfortable. It feels alive, communicative, almost sacred. In silence, your thoughts organize, your emotions settle, your intuition speaks. Answers arise without effort. It becomes clear that noise once distracted you from hearing what was always within. And perhaps the most powerful realization in this stage is this: your transformation is not finished. The overnight change was only the awakening. The real journey is ongoing, unfolding moment by moment, layer by layer. Each stage reveals new awareness, new challenges, new strength. There is no final version of you waiting at the end, only continuous expansion. And strangely, that no longer scares you. Because even though the path is uncertain, your trust has deepened. Even though the destination is unclear, your direction feels right. Even though you don't understand everything happening, you understand enough to keep moving forward. You understand that your life didn't just change overnight to make things easier. It changed to make you ready. Ready to see what others overlook. Ready to walk paths others avoid. Ready to grow beyond limits you once believed defined you. And as this awareness settles deeper into your being, you begin sensing something quietly but unmistakably. This transformation is only the beginning of what you are meant to become. And as this transformation continues unfolding, something even deeper begins to happen. You start realizing that the change was never just about you. At first, everything felt intensely personal: your awareness, your isolation, your emotional shifts, your inner awakening. But slowly, almost quietly, your perspective expands beyond your own experience. You begin sensing that your growth carries impact, that your healing influences others, that your presence alone can shift the atmosphere in ways you never intended, yet cannot deny. People start responding to you differently even when you say nothing. Some feel comfort around you without understanding why. Others feel uneasy, almost exposed, as if your presence reflects something within them they are not ready to face. You notice that conversations become deeper when you speak, or strangely silent when truth lingers unspoken in the air. It's like you carry an energy that disrupts illusions, gently for some, intensely for others. This realization can feel overwhelming at first, because you never asked to influence anyone. You never planned to become someone who triggers reflection in others. Yet it happens naturally. And with that awareness comes a new kind of responsibility, not the pressure to fix anyone, but the understanding that your authenticity alone has power. You begin to understand that being aligned with your truth doesn't just change your life, it changes how others experience themselves around you. And this is where another shift begins, the shift from self-transformation to purposeful existence. You start noticing that your struggles have given you an unusual capacity to understand pain, not intellectually, but deeply emotionally, instinctively. When someone is hurting, you don't just hear their words, you feel what they cannot express. When someone is lost, you recognize the confusion because you've walked through your own darkness. When someone feels alone, you understand the silence that lives behind their smile. Your past suffering transforms into perception, your past confusion transforms into empathy, your past isolation transforms into presence. And suddenly, everything you endured begins to feel meaningful in a new way, not because pain was necessary, but because nothing you experienced was wasted. You start noticing moments where people open up to you unexpectedly, strangers share personal truths, friends seek your perspective. Even those who once misunderstood you begin asking for guidance. It happens naturally, without effort, without intention. Something about your energy communicates safety, clarity, and depth, and people feel it before they understand it. But this stage brings a challenge that many don't talk about: learning boundaries. Because when you become someone who understands deeply, people may unconsciously lean on you heavily. They may seek your calm when they feel chaotic, your clarity when they feel confused, your strength when they feel weak. And if you are not careful, you may begin carrying emotional weight that is not yours to hold. This is where your growth demands balance. You learn that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. You learn that presence does not require emotional absorption. You learn that helping others does not mean abandoning yourself. And learning this can be difficult, especially if your heart naturally wants to give. But your transformation is not meant to drain you, it is meant to align you. And alignment requires honoring your own energy as sacred, not endlessly expendable. Another profound sign in this stage is the sharpening of discernment. You no longer judge quickly, but you also no longer ignore what you sense. You see potential in people, but you also recognize patterns. You offer understanding, but you maintain awareness. You learn to stand in compassion without surrendering clarity. And this clarity changes your relationships in powerful ways. Surface-level connections begin fading naturally. Conversations based on distraction, gossip, or pretense feel exhausting rather than engaging. You find yourself drawn toward depth, authenticity, honesty, even if it means having fewer connections overall. And surprisingly, this no longer feels like loss. It feels like refinement. Quality begins replacing quantity in every part of your life. You also begin noticing something else. Your tolerance for misalignment becomes almost non-existent. Situations that once felt manageable now feel unbearable if they contradict your inner truth. Environments that once felt normal now feel heavy if they suppress authenticity. You can no longer shrink yourself to maintain comfort, not because you are stubborn, but because your awareness refuses to contract. This can make life feel intense, because the world often rewards adaptation more than authenticity. But you begin realizing something powerful: peace cannot exist where truth is compromised. And once you have tasted inner alignment, nothing external can replace it. Another deep change happens in how you view challenges. Earlier, obstacles felt like resistance. Now they feel like direction. When something falls apart, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this revealing?" Every disruption becomes information. Every ending becomes transition. Every delay becomes preparation. You stop measuring progress by comfort and start measuring it by growth. And with this shift comes an unexpected strength, emotional stability rooted not in control but in trust. Even when life feels uncertain, something inside you remains steady. Not because you know what will happen, but because you trust your ability to face whatever does. This inner steadiness becomes one of the clearest signs your life truly changed overnight. Because before, stability depended on external conditions. Now it comes from within, quiet, grounded, resilient. Another powerful experience that emerges in this stage is synchronicity becoming more frequent and more meaningful. Encounters feel timed. Insights arrive exactly when needed. Opportunities appear when you are ready to step forward. Even challenges arise precisely when you have developed the strength to handle them. Life begins to feel less like a series of random events and more like a conversation. A conversation between your awareness and the unfolding path ahead. You begin sensing that when you listen deeply, truly listen, guidance is always present. Not always clear, not always comfortable, but always there. And the more you trust that guidance, the more fluidly life seems to move. Yet despite all this clarity, there are still moments of doubt, moments where you question everything, moments where the path feels lonely again, moments where you wonder if you imagined the transformation entirely. But unlike before, these moments don't consume you. They pass like clouds across a steady sky, because something deeper than doubt now anchors you: experience. You have felt the shift. You have seen the patterns. You have lived the transformation. And no temporary uncertainty can erase what you know in your core. Perhaps one of the most profound realizations in this stage is understanding that awakening is not constant intensity, it is integration. Not every day feels powerful, not every moment feels meaningful. Some days feel ordinary again, quiet, simple, almost uneventful. But now you recognize something beautiful. Ordinary moments are not empty. They are grounding. They are where growth stabilizes. They are where transformation becomes lived reality rather than emotional intensity. You learn to exist peacefully between expansion and stillness, between movement and rest, between seeking and simply being, and slowly something extraordinary happens. You stop searching for proof that your life changed overnight, because you are living the evidence every day. In the way you think differently, in the way you feel more deeply, in the way you respond rather than react, in the way you trust rather than control. Your transformation is no longer an experience you analyze, it becomes the foundation of who you are. And in quiet moments, when everything is still and your mind is clear, you begin sensing something even deeper than purpose, something more subtle, more profound, more expansive. You sense that your life is not just unfolding, it is aligning with truth, aligning with growth, aligning with something far greater than the version of yourself that existed before that sudden, mysterious shift. And in that awareness, a quiet understanding settles within you. You were not simply changed overnight. You were awakened to the role you were always meant to grow into, one step, one realization, one transformation at a time. And as everything continues to settle into place, the most profound realization begins to rise quietly within you. This transformation was never meant to be dramatic forever. It was meant to become natural. At first, the awakening felt intense, overwhelming, almost consuming, like standing in the middle of a storm of awareness, emotion, clarity, and change. But now something different begins to happen. The storm softens, the intensity stabilizes. The chaos organizes itself into quiet understanding, and you begin living in a way that feels both completely new and strangely familiar, like you have returned to a version of yourself that existed long before the world shaped you into something smaller. You begin noticing that you no longer need constant signs to confirm your path. In the beginning, every shift felt like it required proof, validation that what you were experiencing was real, meaningful, purposeful. But now, certainty feels internal, calm, grounded. You don't chase reassurance the way you once did. You don't question every step with fear. You move forward with a quiet steadiness that comes from lived experience rather than hopeful expectation. And this steadiness changes how you move through the world. You react less and observe more. Situations that once would have shaken you now pass through your awareness without disturbing your center. You feel emotions fully, but they no longer control your direction. You experience challenges, but they no longer define your identity. There is space between what happens and how you respond, and in that space, your strength lives. You also begin understanding something that once felt impossible to accept. Not everyone is meant to understand your journey, and for the first time, that realization does not feel painful. It feels freeing. Because you no longer need to explain what cannot be fully expressed. You no longer need approval for what was never meant to be validated externally. Your path becomes personal in the deepest sense, not secret, not hidden, but sacred. And sacred things do not require constant explanation. Another shift happens in how you see time. Before, life felt divided into past regret and future anticipation. But now the present feels expansive, almost alive with possibility. You notice details more deeply. Conversations feel richer. Silence feels fuller. Even simple routines carry awareness. It's not that life becomes extraordinary every moment. It's that you become present enough to recognize the depth already there. You realize that transformation is not about escaping ordinary life. It is about experiencing it consciously. And with that awareness comes a profound sense of peace. Not permanent happiness, not endless excitement, but peace steady, grounded, unshaken by temporary fluctuations. A peace that remains even when things are uncertain. A peace that remains even when answers are incomplete. A peace that does not depend on everything going right, only on your willingness to remain aligned with yourself. You also begin noticing how naturally you release what no longer serves you. Not with force, not with resistance, just quiet letting go. Old fears lose their grip, old narratives lose their authority, old identities feel like clothing that no longer fits, not wrong, just outgrown. And instead of clinging to who you were, you allow yourself to keep evolving without needing to define every stage of your becoming. There is freedom in that, the freedom to grow without constantly measuring yourself against who you used to be. Another powerful realization emerges slowly but unmistakably. Your purpose is not a single event waiting in the future. It is something you express through how you live every day, in the way you speak, in the way you treat others, in the way you make decisions, in the way you remain authentic even when it is uncomfortable. Purpose stops feeling like a destination and starts feeling like a presence, something woven into your awareness, guiding even the smallest choices. You begin trusting that meaningful impact does not always appear dramatic. Sometimes it lives in quiet moments, offering understanding when someone feels unheard, choosing integrity when compromise would be easier, standing firm in truth when silence would be safer. These moments may seem small, but you sense their depth. You sense their ripple effect, even if you never witness how far that ripple travels. And this understanding humbles you in the most beautiful way, because you realize you are not separate from the world you are influencing. You are part of it, shaped by it, contributing to it, evolving within it. Your awakening did not remove you from life, it placed you more deeply inside it. You also become more comfortable with uncertainty than you ever thought possible. The need to control outcomes softens. The urgency to know everything in advance fades. You begin living with openness, prepared to respond rather than desperate to that openness. Life feels less like something to manage and more like something to experience. Of course, moments of difficulty still come. There are days when clarity feels distant, days when emotions feel heavy again, days when the old self whispers familiar fears. But the difference now is profound. You do not get lost there. You move through those moments with awareness, recognizing them as temporary waves rather than permanent states. You no longer mistake challenge for failure. You no longer mistake discomfort for misdirection. You understand that growth continues in cycles, expansion, integration, rest, and expansion again. And with each cycle, your trust deepens. Perhaps the most beautiful change of all is how you now relate to yourself. The inner conflict that once felt constant begins dissolving. The harsh self-judgment softens into understanding. The pressure to be perfect transforms into acceptance of being human while still evolving. You stop fighting yourself and begin working with yourself. You listen when your mind needs stillness. You honor when your body needs rest. You acknowledge when your heart needs expression. This self-alignment becomes the foundation of everything else. And from that foundation grows something quiet but powerful, self-respect that does not depend on achievement, comparison, or recognition. A sense of worth that exists simply because you exist, aware and evolving. You begin realizing that being chosen was never about being selected above others. It was about choosing awareness when unconsciousness was easier, choosing growth when comfort was available, choosing truth when illusion was tempting. It was about answering an inner call that many hear but few fully follow. And that call did not come once. It continues moment by moment, inviting you to remain awake, remain aligned, remain willing to keep becoming. Sometimes you look back at who you were before everything changed overnight and you feel compassion. Not embarrassment, not regret, compassion, because that version of you was doing the best they could with the awareness they had. And without that version, with all their confusion, fear, searching, and struggle, you would not be who you are now. You honor your past instead of resisting it. You accept your present instead of questioning it. You trust your future instead of fearing it. And in quiet moments, when everything is still, you feel something that words can barely describe, a sense of rightness. Not completion, but alignment, like you are standing exactly where you are meant to stand in this stage of your journey. No rush, no resistance, no pretending, just presence. And then the final understanding settles gently, almost like a whisper carried through your awareness. Your life didn't just change overnight to show you signs, awaken your perception, or reshape your path. It changed to return you to yourself, the version of you that was always there beneath expectations, fears, and distractions. The version that sees clearly, feels deeply, lives consciously, and moves with quiet purpose. The transformation was never the destination, it was the beginning of living fully awake. And now, as you continue forward, steady, aware, evolving, you realize something that once would have felt impossible to believe. You are no longer searching for the moment your life changed. You are living the life that change created. And this is who you have become.